Hello and welcome to everyone watching. I'm Rakinatha. Welcome to the By Intent channel. And I do have to confess that our guest today is somebody who's been so influential and really a powerful role model for me personally. And so I'm super excited to have her here today. Pharrell has called her a true talent. Tom Ford has called her brilliant. And so it's a dream interview for me today. And I'm speaking to Monita Rajpal. Monita has 20 years of experience in journalism, 14 of those with CNN. She's worked in Atlanta, Toronto, Hong Kong. She has covered some of the biggest events in the world from, 9/11, the war in Afghanistan, the tsunami in 2004, to even the royal wedding. And then fascinating and amazing conversations with some of the biggest names in design, politics, art, movie from Natalie Portman to Kate Blanchett, some of my favorites, to be honest. And anybody who's seen any of Monita's interviews know they are very smooth. They are thought-provoking, they are sincere. And see this beautiful, smart, charismatic Indian woman, and it made such a difference to my confidence and my belief in what I could be one day in the world. So Monita, a huge, huge welcome. It is such an honor to have you here today. Welcome.
It is such a pleasure. You're going to make me start to cry, to tear up, just hearing all those lovely words that you have to say. It's very, very, very lovely to hear. And thank you so much for having me on your show.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure. And Monita, we've chatted a little bit about what By Intent is about. You've had a look at our website, and it's really about purposeful living and inspiring that in any form that we can, and helping people to really reckon with those questions around identity and purpose. And as you can imagine, with just your life journey, I would have so many questions for you. But I'll start with, one of the ones I would have asked you if I had met you 10 years ago, or even today still kind of holds true. And that is that, if anybody watches your interviews, you have this ability to create really equal footing, if I may call it that, in how you engage with people. In that, one, you never intimidate your guests, but neither are you ever intimidated. So you create this level playing field, which I think changes how conversations and interviews are held. And I think it's quite an, it's quite an art to craft and master. How did you do that?
If I had to sum it up, it would be in one word, or with one word. It would be curiosity. I approach my interviews with curiosity. I am genuinely interested in the person that I'm interviewing, in the person that I have had the opportunity and privilege to meet and sit face to face. I looked at it as my own private masterclass, if you will. The people that I had the privilege of interviewing are true masters in their field. They are creatives, they are politicians, they are scientists, they are people who are continuing to push the boundaries of excellence in what they do. And for me to be able to sit right in front of them and have their full attention, it is such an opportunity to delve into their world and their mind. For me, it became a research project, if you will, for my own life, in terms of finding ways to live that purposeful life, as you so beautifully put. These were people who have chosen to live life their way, and I was just really desperate to know how did they do that. What were the skills that they needed, or what was the mindset that was needed to be able to have the courage and the confidence to go out and forge your own way, or even to find that elusive passion. We hear so much about that in the world today, about finding your passion, but finding your passion is not as easy as it sounds. It isn't something that is just there and you're like, oh yeah, that's what I want to do. And that's it. Just because you enjoy doing something doesn't mean, or that you're passionate about it, doesn't mean it's going to be easy to do. So it was a way for me to just learn, really. And I think when you approach an interview with someone who is very high profile, someone who is extremely famous, who has gone through and done countless numbers of interviews, when you approach them with just a genuine interest and curiosity in their life without an agenda, I think they pick up on that, because it is a very intimate space. That interview, that one-on-one, is a very intimate space. You know, it's often me, that person, a camera crew, and that is it. And it is crucial. Has always been crucial for me to maintain almost a sacred space, so that the person can feel comfortable to be themselves and to answer in whichever way they want. So for me, it comes down to just being curious about them and to learn from them.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's something I'm going to remind myself, and something for all of us to carry with us, because it's hard not to have an agenda, especially with so much in the world, so much information and running from one place to the other. And I think, I was watching so many of your interviews just, leading up to today's conversation, and I certainly agree with you. It felt like you created a sacred space, and that wisdom that kind of came out from those interviews still lying true. And one of the amazing things that, I'm sure your guests have told you, and you've heard from others, but you had this ability to actually give your guests insights about themselves just by virtue of some of the questions you asked. And I think of two examples. And one was you were speaking to Stella McCartney, and you kind of made the analogy or the reference to the pictures her mom used to take, and drawing that parallel to, that is a form of communication with her to what, Stella was doing with design. And you could see she was like, oh, wow, like I hadn't thought about that. And I was like, wow, it's those moments of insight, and I think you did something similar for Pharrell when you kind of made the reference about the McDonald's jingle and his past working there. And wow, now it's, he's the basis of the jingle. And again, he himself said he hadn't really thought about it that way. So, yeah, I think, is that ability just comes from creating that sacred space that you can actually create so many insights for your guests?
I think for me, what has always been crucial is research. Do as much research. I would do a lot of research, and I often insisted on, I had a brilliant team, a producer, an associate producer working, but often I would do a lot of the research because it was my way of getting to know the person that I was interviewing. I had to know even the smallest details, because I felt that once I had all of that homework done, right? Once I had all the research done, then I could just sit back and have a conversation. It was very important for me to know that I had the information that was there, that the background that was needed, because that's just, at the end of the day, the research is really background. Everything that we talk about then in the interview becomes a new perspective, a new angle, even a new topic. So research is crucial. You have to do the work, and otherwise you end up with I never really wanted to have those kind of questions, like, tell me about your latest film, or, tell me about your latest song. So for example, with Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins, it was a really, truly interesting interview in that, on a couple of levels. On the one hand, when it came to, firstly, when we're talking about research, we were talking about the title of one of his new songs on his new album. And I asked him about the background of that song, simply because I had researched the meaning of that word that he'd chosen for his song. And I read somewhere in the annals of research and the internet, that word had represented death And he hadn't thought of it that way, although he said that that song was inspired by the death of his mother. So it was, like you said, you give your interviewer something else to think about, but that's not my intention to actually do, but sometimes it comes out that way. It's that deep level of research, of trying to find a new way. One thing, I don't want to do is to repeat interviews. So, when it comes to that, and also the second point after the research, it's also to that interview upped my game. I really was forced to up my game because, at the beginning, sometimes you have people who are on these film junkets. And, for people who don't know what junkets are, this is just like when, a movie star or is on a press tour and they are releasing a new film. So they'll have like a dozen journalists or more come in one after the other and ask them questions. And so they often get bored, right? And I didn't want to get bored, but they don't necessarily want to be doing that. They don't want to be there. That's not why they went into the craft, is to have these interviews. And so they often give off that energy that, I don't want to be there. So you have to literally try and find a way to dance with them in a way that they actually want to join in. And with Billy Corgan, it started out where he's like, okay, I'm just going to give some one-liners and, see if, she'll catch. And it ended up being a fascinating interview, which actually I think he really enjoyed as well. So yeah, it is like a dance, sometimes one partner doesn't want to join in, but if you make it interesting enough and if you have the right moves, maybe they'll enjoy it too.
Absolutely. And, even on your blog, I think you kind of speak about it as, conversations, they're influencing and shaping both people in that conversation. They're actually really powerful when I think they are deliberate. And you knew how to create that both with how you engage, but like you're saying, I think the depth of research and knowledge you brought to it. So that's pretty tremendous. And you spoke about curiosity, right, as we started right off, and about learning. If you look back, gosh, through all of that experience, is there a moment, whether it was an interview or just an event you covered, that was a really big learning moment, or possibly even a transformative moment for you, where something you witnessed or heard or engaged with changed something in you?
I think there was one moment with when I was interviewing Tom Ford. He'd always been someone I had admired for a very long time. I think it was a moment where he had said that when he left Gucci and Yves Saint Laurent, where he was the creative director, when he'd left, that he felt lost because, designing was all he'd ever known and loved at that time. This was pre-film director and screenplay writer time. And that was all that he'd known, and he felt lost. And he realized that he had been climbing a ladder that was as he says, on the wrong wall, that was placed on the wrong wall. And for me, that was a pivotal moment because, as a career professional, you strive, you work hard, you keep pushing, and just to keep being better. But there are times when I felt, I don't know, am I going in the right way? And so when he said he felt lost, I thought it was something that clicked inside me, that thought, if someone like him had felt lost, someone of his stature felt lost, then it was okay for me to feel that way too. That I didn't have to have it all figured out. That it wasn't, I didn't have to be there already. That this could still be this journey, this process. And that really changed the way I started to look at things and look at life, really. That again, if it was okay for someone like him to feel that way, then it was okay for me too.
Yeah. So relatable. I mean, it's kind of, a story a lot of people are telling about their lives, right? Is, I mean, I personally feel that way. Really got pulled into a corporate direction, and it just became less and less fulfilling. And you're trying to fight that, but you know, there comes a point where you really can't anymore. It's either, okay, I'm just going to fall into whatever this is, figure it out, you know, fall into it. And it is reassuring, right, to even hear you say that and hear him say that. And you know, I read your piece on Thrive Global, I think it was, you know, about your journey as well, and the decision you made to really leave that world of journalism. And yeah, I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about that as well, in that transition that you made.
Yeah, so about a year before my son was born, it was, I'd lived in so many different countries. I'd moved from, you know, I grew up in Hong Kong. Then when I was a teenager, my family, you know, we moved to Toronto. And then for work, I moved to Atlanta for CNN headquarters. And then I was transferred to London, where I lived for over 8 years, and then transferred to Hong Kong again, which was kind of almost if you look at it from a philosophical perspective, it's quite huge, but that's a whole other conversation. But by then I was really tired. I had worked a lot of very difficult shifts at CNN. I'd work overnight shifts where, you know, you're up at, you know, 2 a.m, and then, or you're up at, you know, 10 p.m. and going to work until 7. I remember driving home from work one time when I was living in Atlanta, and I was working from 10 till 7, so 10 p.m. till 7 a.m. and saying, well, at least I get to see the sunrise every morning, because you're trying to justify it, right? You're trying to find the bright side. And then when I moved to London, I was fronting the morning show in London, which was seen, you know, around the world. And so you think, well, you know, it's a great opportunity, and I'm doing this great show, and, you know, a lot of breaking news happens, so it's great for my career. But, you know, inside, slowly, I was starting to, you know, just feel really tired. But you can't really say that, because you've got this great gig, right? Yeah. So what do? You keep at it. You keep at it, and you keep hoping that something else even better comes along, but you don't know what that looks like. So by the time, you know, I was in Hong Kong, I was in my, gosh, I was 38, 39. And I was recently engaged, and I thought, I just don't know. You know, it didn't feel it. I couldn't feel it anymore. You know, every time I would get asked to do a show or a shift, I'd be like, I just want to go home and have dinner with some friends and have a normal schedule, a normal life, a normal, like, work at, you know, 9 till 5, for that little period. I just wanted normality. And of course, and in television and media, normality does not exist. A life is very, very difficult to hold on to, a normal life anyway. And some people thrive on that. And, you know, for me, I needed it, at least for a little period of time, because then you can come in and out. But once you've had it for a little while, you want more. So, the decision was made, and I then 2 months after leaving, I got married. And then, you know, a few months later, you know, I found out I was pregnant. So I thought of everything as a sign that I was moved, because I was getting older by this time. You know, I'm turning 40. You know, having a child at 40 is not easy. And I was worried that I might have missed the boat on that for me. And it's something that I'd wanted. So I believe in that sense, things happened in the right way. And then, you know, my husband was also seeing that, you know, that I was starting to detach myself from this rat race, right? Or this striving in this rat race. And so he decided to leave his work too, his job too. And we then decided to leave the, you know, the center of
Yeah.
hectic, which is Hong Kong, and
Yeah.
moved to the English countryside. It was a complete 180. So you have skyscrapers, cars everywhere, people everywhere, noise, to quiet. And it was really necessary for our emotional well-being and our mental well-being, and also our physical well-being. And we keep saying that we did it for our son, but actually we really did it for us. He was the catalyst,
Yeah.
but we did it for us. And, you know, we had a lot of people ask us, you know, but what are you doing there? What exactly are you doing? And it's almost as if the whole idea of taking some space for yourself is an anomaly, that it's this weird thing. I mean, what do you mean you're not working? Well, we were in our own way. And it's hard for people to really understand at that time anyway, the whole concept of working from home or living in the countryside. Now, I think, you know, because of this lockdown, it's become a very attractive idea. But I think people found it very hard for them to understand why I would, because I had this high profile life, and why I wouldn't just go back into it after my son was born. It's like, that was the last thing I wanted to do, was go back into a world where I had no control over my day, which is exactly what I'd always wanted, was to wake up in the morning and have my say in how I wanted my day to be. And you make a lot of sacrifices to live that life. You know, you don't, but it's when you're actually really happy and when you wake up in the morning, they don't feel like sacrifices. They actually feel like you don't miss that stuff. You know, I don't miss the hectic or the restaurants. And yeah, of course, sometimes I'd be lying if I said, you know, my husband, I would love to be able to go out and grab, you know, amazing sushi or some amazing Thai food somewhere, which is hard to come by here in the English countryside. But, you know, at the end of the day, you learn to live with a lot less, but realize you're getting a hell of a lot more in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, gosh, I commend both of you. It's so brave. It really is, especially like you were saying, you know, being really ahead of the curve in doing that. And opting for that lifestyle, and even realizing you have a choice, because a lot of people, you know, that's part of how we get tricked into it, right? You don't realize that sometimes you do have a lot more choice and power than you think you do. But I think, you know, really brave. And I've had this conversation with a lot of people about lockdown and where we are now, and just saying that, gosh, if anything, this year has helped us kind of return back to our core most values. That if
it's also a redefinition of success.
Yeah.
I think you redefine, what does success actually mean to you? Does it mean a title on a business card? Does it mean a certain number of zeros in your bank account? Or does it mean that when you wake up, or when you actually feel stable, you feel happy, you feel that, okay, you know, so things aren't, you know, necessarily moving so fast, but you know, we'll get there. You know, you'll understand that things will happen at the right time, and that you're not on this track. That's this endless track of just not going anywhere. So you get higher up a ladder, or a corporate ladder, or you get a primetime show, or, you know, you get more money. That's well and good if that's what you want. Again, it has to be what the individual, what you want, what I want. And, you know, from having, you know, Indian parents, you know, well, no, what do you mean you're not going to go back and get that? But that was such a great job. And yeah, it was for that time. I learned a lot, and I loved it for that time. And now it's time for something else.
Yeah, Absolutely. I think that's the thing. There's a lot of societal pressure, right? Whether it's your family, wherever that's coming from, you've got to fit into a box.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
really hard when you don't want to, and you're saying, hey, I want to kind of rethink the configuration of my box, at least,
Exactly.
in
Exactly.
the least. So I think that's so valuable and so beautiful, I think, for people to hear, again, from somebody at your level and the career you had, and being so relatable to what you experience. So I think this is going to be really, really valuable for anybody who is going through this or who questions it, or even wants to make the jump, but it's like, no, I've got to hold on to this. That there is light, there is something beyond what we think and see all the time. So super brave, and thank you, because it's inspiring us in a different way now. So you're still inspiring us.
Thank you.
And you spoke a lot about how hectic the career was, and I can only imagine, right, from the hours you worked to just the pressure, right, of working in media and just being on the go all the time. And again, you were fraternizing with the biggest names, and you were in this world, right, which is at the highest, most level, and even had certain fame and recognition. I mean, people would probably recognize you on the streets, right? And you had all of that. It's a lot. It's a lot for anyone. How did that very different life to what most of us would have ever experienced, how has that shaped you as a person, as a human being, especially now that you've stepped away from that identity and you're in a different one now, and you look back? How did it really shape you?
I think when you have a job where it is high profile, and you work at a where you work with a brand that is high profile, that becomes part of your identity, right?
Yeah.
So it is the assumption that it's Monita Rajpal, back then, of CNN. That's what I did, was who I was. That was always the assumption of that was part of the identity.
Yeah.
And I think, it wasn't how I lived my life outside of the newsroom, outside of the set. I was who I was, just, as you see me right now, that's exactly who I wasn't any different. But I think when you leave that role, you realize how much of your identity is wrapped up in what you do. So often people will say, what you do is not who you are, or what you do is not what you are, but it is wrapped up in your identity. And to try to extricate yourself from that is what I call a detox process, right?
Yeah.
But that's not something that other people have placed on you. It's what you place on yourself. You wear those things, right? You wear your job title, your bank account, the company that you work for. You wear those as your armor, as your protection.
Yeah.
Well, this is who I am, right? This is who I work for, because when you go out in social situations, pre-COVID anyway, people will say, well, oh, and what do you do? Yeah. Right? And that's your armor. Yeah. That's a feeling of acceptance. You're allowed through the door. If you don't have that, who are you? Right? Yeah. So it was a process of, trying to figure out, well, who are you now? And I've always been a very spiritual person. And I think I did ask myself a lot of questions. Okay, so Monita, who are you now? Right? You don't have that brand. You don't have that job title. You don't even have that exposure, right? So who are you? And I had to dig deep. And the answer at the very first level came in finding out that I was going to be a mom. So, that was another layer. That was a layer for me to say, okay, let's take this time now actually to stop making it about me, right? because when you start to ask questions of yourself, it is a very selfish entity. And I use selfish not in a bad way. Selfish is a good word for me, I think, because it means that you're looking into yourself, you're taking care of your needs and what you want. But also it can be quite trying, because there's only so much you can keep asking and figuring out. So I said, okay, well, now I'm this person to somebody else for now, right? And that helped me take the foot off the professional gas, the pedal, took the foot off the pedal and just rode this wave. So yeah, it's a transition. And I think you keep asking we keep asking ourselves those questions of who are you beyond those titles and those labels. It's not easy. It takes time, but it's worth it.
Yeah. And I think, you said the word detox, right? And I kind of think a detox is something you gotta continually do at certain periods. It's never really done. And it seems like this is the same. It's a continuous rechecking, at least at certain points with yourself, on who am I outside of a role and a title. Even new ones, a new role, new titles that
even as a mom, that's a title, right? So who am I outside of that too? Because after a certain point of time, okay, well, I'm still that person inside of me. And I think that's where, for me, that's a lot of where the blog, the Citrine Room came from, was a way for me to express who I am, or who I think I am. I don't know for sure, but what I gravitate towards. So it was a way, and it is a way for me to continually have that conversation of who am I.
Yeah, and I think you read my mind, because I was going to segue there and talk about the Citrine Room. And yeah, just tell us a little bit more about it. And like you're saying, I think you're trying to express yourself. So I'd love to know what your vision is for it. And you talk about such an amazing array of topics. And I really love the short podcast format. Each episode kind of flows into the other. And I was listening to them and they're really terrific. But yeah, what led you down that path, and what is it all about?
It came down to this, again, from the very beginning, our conversation, the word of curiosity. I've always been a very curious person, whether it is about other people, about our world, about life, or about myself. And I'm also a voracious reader. I love to read. Particularly, I love books. They're always my first love, but I love magazines too. And I found that I wasn't getting what I needed out of the magazines that I always loved to read, whether it was Vogue or The Economist or Foreign Policy or Harper's Bazaar. I wasn't getting that something that I found that a lot of focus was on the next generation, the younger generation. Then I found okay, but what about my generation? We still have something to give, right? We have knowledge, we have experience. And so I thought, well, if it's not out there, well, why don't I just build it myself? So it started out as a blog where, I explore the things that we've been talking about, life, about questions that we ask ourselves or of others. And I take my own experiences as inspiration. And also it was a way for me to continue finding those really amazing pieces that are out there around the world, and to share, because I've always been that someone say, hey, did you read this thing? I read this amazing article. I read this great book, or I watched this, brilliant TED talk. And it's, again, goes back to that research thing too. It's like me doing the research every week, trying to find some amazing people. And then thirdly, it was about representation. I wanted to find people who weren't the ones that were always chosen on covers of magazines or profiles in magazines. I wanted to find those creatives and brilliant minds and thinkers and doers who don't get the recognition that they deserve. So it was a place for me to have that. And it's a conscious effort and everything and every image that I choose to make sure that it is true to that ideal of representation. So, you know, this coming week, I've got an amazing actress, producer, director from Vietnam. I've got, you know, a former college basketball star who is now building a brand for the Black community. I've got an Indian designer, as well as you know, the current chief of the Federal Reserve of the Bank of San Francisco. So it's a varied, and then there are other articles about psychology and things. So it's a real mixture of, I think, who I am. You know, my interests in psychology and philosophy and life and spirituality, as well as news and lifestyle, all mixed into one. And then, you know, the podcast, you know, it's a mixture of conversations with people, but also just everyday people. Because one thing I found, which was really interesting, was that there are interesting people everywhere, that actually every single person on this planet is fascinating, is so interesting, has a wonderful story. It's our job, my job as a journalist, to find it, to find that angle, to find that story. So that's how it started out, you know, talking to neighbors, talking to, you know, people that I would meet. So it's the podcast, it's a mixture of that, as well as audio versions of the blog, because I realized that I actually love audio. I love radio.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I have to say, I really enjoyed, I think your recent one about luck. That was so interesting. You know, and hearing you interweave your story and some of your examples, how it played out in your life. Very interesting. And I went to a retreat a few months back, and we spoke about luck and it as well. And really from the perspective again of saying that studies show that those who believe in luck, you know, of course, are luckier.
Yeah.
Going back to the, you know, power of kind of your mind. And so it was really interesting. And so I've been very interested in luck since then. So it was really nice to hear your piece. And then, you know, I really enjoyed the one about Leila Jana as well. And I didn't know her personally either, but I had followed her for a few years. And so it was amazing to just, you know, hear you talk about her as well. And I mean, what an incredible person, and, you know, what a loss. 2020 has just been, yeah, I know it's been one thing after the other. So, but yeah, I think it was such a beautiful tribute that you actually paid to her. So that was amazing. But one of the things that comes up for me with your podcast, because I was thinking this, and I know you did one of them, you kind of said, hey, you in your kid's room, you're in the baby's room, and you were speaking. And you have this ability, you know, kind of to the very first question that I said, which is so conversational. I mean, I'm finding such ease and joy in conversing with you right now.
Oh, I'm so glad. I am too.
Thank you. And I, you know, a part of me, of course, is intimidated because, like I said, you know, you know, you've been a role model for me for so long. But this has been such, again, to the power, I think, of how you create conversations with people, right? It's really been enjoyable.
I'm so glad.
It truly, truly has. And I listen to the podcast, but they're also so, you know, they are at the highest level of journalism as well, right? The knowledge you bring, of course, the way you speak, you know, all those years of anchoring, all of that, so natural, right? It's just so flawless. And I wanted to ask you about sort of that stream of consciousness. Is that also just something that comes in how you create content? It's of course talent, it's your experience, but that these amazing ideas come to you about what to talk about, and how you cover it and speak to it.
I think that's a really good way of describing it, as a stream of consciousness. When it comes to the topics, you know, sometimes it could be something that's just sitting there at the back of my head, and I don't know exactly what I want to say or if I want to go there. And sometimes I'm at my computer and it'll just come out. Or it'll be something that I've heard on a radio, or I listened to on a radio, or a conversation that I had with my husband, or even my child, or, you know, a friend, something that I've read, and then I want to expand on it. Or it could be the pieces that I will have chosen for the repost section of the blog, and something out of there, because I think I realized that there's all the stories, no matter how different the people are, or the stories that are whatever it may be, whether it's political or philosophical, they're all connected. There is a connection somewhere. And I find that that my blog then is that trying to find that connection. So when I'm sitting at a computer, I'm just typing away, just trying to write something. And if it flows, then I know that that's what I need to explore. I mean, the other day, I remember I wrote a piece a while back about yoga, and it was the way it flowed. It started out as being a topic that I was exploring because it was what I found I needed to do at the start of lockdown. It was, a strange time for everyone in the world, right? I mean, literally, it was like everybody was inside. You couldn't go anywhere. And then also, there was a very close aunt of mine. She passed away, but I couldn't go and be there with my family. So I needed to do something with that energy that I felt, and I didn't want to sit, and so I went and took to the mat, and I realized the connection to the rest of my life in the past, about how I saw yoga, and the kind of classes that I took were a reflection of where I was mentally and emotionally at that time. Whether it was, I was always stressed out, so I needed something vigorous, which is kind of counterproductive, or I was feeling anxious about how I looked. So it was all about trying to find something that was about, weight loss or bikini bodies and all that stuff. And then now it's all about just restoration, right? So I looked at my life through yoga, the classes that I'd taken. So that's how so yes, long story short, it's a stream of consciousness, kind of like my answers right now.
No, I love that. And I appreciate you sharing that, because, as you're saying that, I was like, oh my God, it's exactly a kind of journey I've had towards yoga. And very recently, I've only in the last year kind of gone back to the practice, exactly the way you're saying, with wanting to be present in my body and really grounded in it, with no really, no agenda beyond that, no weight loss agenda. Exactly. So I can totally relate. And I couldn't do yoga a few years back. I didn't get it. It was like, okay, it's nice, but I didn't feel it the way that I feel it now. And I'm like, oh my God, I felt like it saved me, in the last year or so in so many ways. So thank you for sharing that. So that stream of consciousness always has a purpose.
Yeah, sometimes.
You don't know what it's connecting with.
Yeah.
I think some of the questions, that I sort of want to wrap up with, the last few ones, were really on kind of the macroscopic level. And I really was very interested in hearing, I think, your opinion on some of them, again, with your experience in your past, and I think your lens on it. One being social media, and how it's changed the world of journalism itself, right? In essence, you're kind of the epitome of it, right? Anchor, talk show host, and now you've got your own blog. And it's journalism. It's still very much journalism, especially coming from somebody such as yourself, who really knows the craft, and you know what you're doing there. What are your thoughts about that, and how things have shifted, and just the social media landscape, good, bad, just, your personal reflections on where we are in the world and what social media has done?
I think social media, when I started seeing the rise of the power of social media when I was still at CNN. At that time we called it citizen journalism. People start to have the cameras, the camera phones. So people were they were active participants in news, right? Or the way news is being told. good and not good. In that good, in that you have, you know, a direct, you know, bird's eye view of something that's happening, whether it's a protest or a natural disaster. There you have that access to that footage. Not good is that you don't know if it's true, right? You don't know if it's verified in any way, accurate in any way. That's social media in a nutshell, in that it's good, in that you have the viewpoints, you have various viewpoints, and you have access to them. So people around the world have access to stories from around the world and different lenses, right? The not so good part is that you don't know which is true and which isn't. What's now been coined as fake news, or as the current administration would like to call alternative facts. So that therein lies the real conundrum, I think, for journalists and people, you know, the people who are use news, or who watch news, read news, and who have an appetite for it. So the job is for journalists to always ensure that what is being reported is facts, not just what is being reported on social media. See, a lot of the times we see, oh, this is what's trending online. Well, what's trending is just sometimes an algorithm, sometimes it's just people responding, but that's not necessarily what is news. And so when you then, it's like whatever you focus on grows, right? It's the same thing in social media. Whatever you focus on will grow. So I think there's a real power to it if it's being used in a positive way to galvanize people for an issue, whether it is a protest against brutality, against police brutality on the Black community, or if it's trying to change the way governments govern, right? Then the negative side of it is you don't know what's real. So as a consumer, right, your job right now is to be really careful and critical and ask, is this real? How do I, and then do the work, right? Because I think in the past, as you know, in news, we would just sit back and let the journalists tell us what the news was. And, you know, at that time, when, you know, there was 6 o'clock news or the 10 o'clock news or the 11 o'clock news, before 24-hour news or before social media, there was an element of trust. You trusted that the person giving you the news was credible, and the information that was being relayed is credible and facts and true, right? You still think that, you still hope that of the people who are presenting the news, but I think the filters with which the news is being used is testing that. And with social media, you don't have that trust. You don't know what's coming. So you have to follow the people that you know are verified, in the sense, not with the blue tick, that's not what I mean. Yeah. Verified in that you know that their agenda is purely to give you the facts and perspective. Yeah. So that's another good way of saying too, social media does also provide perspective if you follow the right accounts, I guess.
Absolutely. And next question, it's a bit of a tough one. And so in fairness, you know, again, it would just be your opinion, but it'd be interesting to hear it from your perspective, being so close to this world. But we know that representation, right? And whether you're talking BIPOC or specifically, you know, women in color, right? A woman of color in the media, there's been, you know, there's never been enough representation, right, to accurately depict life and, you know, who we actually are on the streets of a city or a town. And one would hope there's been progress in the last 6-10 years. Things have changed. And I think everyone's very cognizant that, you know, decisions are made, even in the newsroom, they're made in the boardroom for the news floor, right? And I think people understand that power, but do you personally, do you see positive signs of changes in representation and where we've come? Or
I think, yeah, that's a really tough one, I think, because there's a lot more, there are a lot more conversations that are being had now, I think, which is always a good thing. You know, when I started in news in Toronto, for me, it wasn't, I didn't see representation as my goal. I think I was young and naive. I just assumed that I work hard, I'm going to get an opportunity, right? Yeah. Toronto back then still was miles ahead the rest of the country, rest of the world. Canada is miles ahead of us because it understood that it needed to reflect the people that they were showing the news programs to. That didn't necessarily mean that the boardrooms or the executives reflected the streets of Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal. It didn't. That's not the case. The faces, sure, who were representing on TV, yes, but not in the decision making. So that's where it was lacking. At CNN, I was hired by an Indian woman. Her name was Reena Golden, and she was very cognizant of, because it was CNN International, it had to look like CNN International. So she was miles ahead too. And she was an executive. So in that sense, yeah, back then, are we going beyond that? I don't know. I think we've slowed down. I think things have slowed down a little bit and a lot more work needs to be done. So for example, a few weeks ago, I saw an article in the Guardian newspaper online. And it was a review of this film that was on Netflix that starred Australian actor Chris Hemsworth.
Yes, yeah.
And they had a photograph of Chris Hemsworth and another actor that they had, and they didn't name the other actor. Randeep Hooda.
Oh, yes.
So he was in that photograph along with Chris Hemsworth, and the caption only had Chris Hemsworth's name on it. Didn't have Randeep Hooda's name on it. And the implication was he was an extra, when actually he had a really pivotal role in that film. Yeah. And I thought, if someone who is not a person of color, they wouldn't think that way. They wouldn't think to say, wait a minute, we need to put the other person's name on too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think therein lies the crux of the issue, is that in all roles, there needs to be somebody who is going to have that kind of awareness. That you're not just, even something simple as, if you are advertising jewelry, right? Rings, bracelets. You don't really see people of colors, their hands, advertising jewelry. Yeah. So I think there's a long way to go, but conversations are being had. And I think there are more and more people who are feeling a lot more courageous and confident to speak out and actually change it. Because it's like, Lanny Smith, the former college basketball player, now entrepreneur and CEO, or Beyonce said, if there's no table, if you're not invited to the table, build your own. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So I figured that's what I'm doing too with my own.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I hope that answered the question.
No, it did. And it was a tough one. And I just wanted to hear your perspective, which I think was...
It's frustrating.
Balanced.
It's frustrating. Yeah. It's frustrating every time. I mean, look, I have these conversations at home with my husband. He is a white Englishman. And, we have these conversations. I say, and it's, he's a worldly, intelligent man. And it might even be difficult for him to understand where I'm coming from. It's like, you need to have representation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You just do.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, the conversations we are having right now are very powerful because we need to recognize bias in order to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's inherent in all of us. You know, we cannot understand the socialization of any group that we technically didn't grow up in, right? And didn't have those experiences. And so we have to open up those conversations to
And then
really,
action, you know,
yeah,
afterwards we can talk until the cows come home, but you need to do something. It's not enough to say, oh yeah, there's a problem. Yeah, there's a problem. You need to do something about it. You know, the next, you know, executive needs to be a person of color, you know, or next news director or whatever it is, or, you know, person. And it's a conscious effort to do that, because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, we could talk about that
Yeah.
for the next hour, if not more. But yeah, you know, again, just cognizant of time. This has been tremendous, Monita. I mean, I'm going to listen to this again and just absorb a lot of, you know, what you've said. You've shared so much, I think, again, so sincerely and honestly about your journey and experiences that I think anyone listening, it's going to be so, so valuable, and it's going to resonate and impact. But I've got one or two last ones, but these are light ones and they should be fun.
Sure, no problem.
So one is, you know, what is a question you've always wanted somebody to ask you? I mean, I'm sure you've done a lot of interviews. Is there something where you've like, you know, you've always felt, hey, I wish somebody would ask me that, even if it's fun or quirky? Or
what is the one question? What's my secret pleasure?
Ooh.
I think it's researching skincare.
Okay.
I'm obsessed with researching skincare. Always have been. I am not one to just, you know, say, if someone says, oh, this is really great, and they know, why is it great? What is it about that that's great? And why does it cost that much? So if I'm looking for something, I will, I mean, much to my husband's chagrin, I will search online. I mean, ad nauseum. It's crazy. It's actually a bit of an obsession.
Okay, that's amazing though. At least I kind of know where to go for.
Putting a section on my website about my reviews, you know, of what I think is good skincare.
It's so important though. There's so much to that. I mean, I know just the tip of it, and I'm still like, gosh, you know. So that's amazing. So it's great that you have that. So please do share. share on your blog. That would be amazing.
Okay, I will.
But that's cool. Okay, cool. So that was the secret pleasure. I like that. And then I had a few sort of like really short. These are short. You know, you can give a word as an answer. It's absolutely fine. 1 or 2 words. One is, who is Monita really at her core, at your most authentic self?
Inquisitive.
Okay, nice. What is your recent most favorite book? A recent one.
Ooh, A Little Life.
Okay, nice. Any podcasts you would recommend?
Aside from my own, let me see. You know, I love Oprah. I do. I learn so much from her Super Soul sessions, and I think they are just they're that roadmap towards understanding that no matter what, no matter how flawed we think we are, or how difficult our journey is, there is a way through. And actually, that those difficulties are the nuggets of wisdom, really the nuggets of wisdom that we need to make our way towards the next step of our life. So I mean, look, I listen to the radio more than anything else right now, because when I'm home, I always have the radio on. And it's such a fantastic and intimate experience. So yeah, I think that for now, that's what I tend to go back to is Oprah's. I mean, after all, it's Oprah.
Yeah, yeah, no, those are, they're timeless, they're brilliant.
Yeah.
So inspiring. And how do you consume the news now?
Oh, that's a very good question. Via Twitter. And so I usually start my day. After my son is off at preschool, I will have my cup of tea and my laptop, and I go through through all the websites, the news websites, whether it's The Guardian, The Telegraph here in the UK, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, Washington Post, the Hindustan Times, the magazines, and I just scan.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then I go to Twitter because I follow the news websites there. It goes back to what I was saying about, making sure what you follow and the stories. Sometimes that they post are like, really, that's not news. But yeah, so various means. Very little television, interestingly enough. Very little television news.
Kind of leads to the next question I was going to ask. Who is your favorite newscaster now?
My favorite newscaster?
Yeah.
I don't think I have one. I'm afraid to say. I don't watch much television news anymore. Maybe that was part of that detox process. Right. I mean, I might catch myself watching the 6 o'clock, the BBC 6 o'clock or the ITV, but not much enough to have a favorite.
Totally fair. I was just curious. And then absolute final question. Is there a message you really want to share or something you just want to say today?
I think it's so important to recognize the value of our individual journey, the value of every experience that we have, no matter how hard, painful, little. Our story, our experiences make up our story, and our stories make up who we are. And there is a recognition. When you recognize the value of your experiences, then you recognize the value of your story. And if you recognize the value of your story, you recognize your worth. And I think if we see that in ourselves, we'll see that in other people. So I think that's the most important thing. And I think that's why I share some of my experiences in my blog, because, it took a long time for me to recognize that no matter how many years of experience I will have had as a journalist, or what some would say is that building of credibility, I, like everybody else, I still say, well, does it really matter what I say? Is my voice really, or my story really interesting? And then if I think that other people's stories are interesting, I'm not talking about famous people. I'm talking about, the average person that you meet at the checkout line or in the street. Their stories are interesting, then why isn't mine? And I think if we all thought that way, then I think we'd recognize the value in each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me think of Humans of New York and
yes, that's
Humans
exactly.
of LA.
Yes, that's exactly.
Yeah, they are as big as they are, and people really, everybody's drawn to that. So
absolutely, we connect, right? We connect to authenticity, we connect to honesty, because not only are we seeing ourselves perhaps, but we recognize empathy, we empathize, we sympathize, we yearn, we hope, and that's all part of the human experience, and that's connection. And that's what I think a lot of my interviews were about, good conversations. And I think good conversations really connect us. And it's so important to feel that connection, and to know that no matter how alone you may feel in whichever experience you have, you're not.
Yeah, absolutely. And it reminds me of, what Oprah said is that after every interview with any guest, all of them, no matter what story it was, would always ask, how did I do?
Yeah.
It's that certain validation we seek, right?
Yes. Yeah, there was, there was a great person that I interviewed, a comedian, Russell Peters, many years ago. And, he told me that, one of his shows, they'd sold out, they sold out more than Madonna did. I think they sold out more tickets every second than Madonna did. And I said to him, he was still searching for validation. Why did he still need that validation? And everybody does. And, even as comedians or anything, no matter how great the review may be, if one person, or everyone's laughing in the audience, if one person isn't laughing, they're going to zero in on that person. And wait a minute, that's what we do, right?
Yeah.
We all seek it. Everybody does.
Absolutely do.
So how'd I do?
You did amazing. You did amazing. Monita, thank you so, so much. Thank you to your family. I know we've taken up some of your time with them. And thank you to Gracie.
Oh yeah, she's around.
She had some screen time with you.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah, this is such an illuminating conversation, and I know people will feel that way and, like I said, resonate with it and impact them in some way. So thank you for sharing so, so generously. This is such an amazing conversation. And yeah, to everybody watching, please, be sure to subscribe, like. I will leave the details for the Citrine Room and Monita's handles all in the description box, so you can reach out. Definitely follow the blog. It's truly incredible, and like I said, such a great quality of journalism, really, right? I don't see it as a blog. I really see it as something else. It'll be interesting to see how that transforms as well. But it's really exceptional. So please do keep telling those stories. We are listening. Definitely want to share that with you as well. And I think I've personally missed you in the mediascape. So
thank you.
It's fantastic to just have your voice out there.
You can still find me. I'm still there.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for this incredible opportunity. It's been a huge pleasure and privilege, Rocky, to speak with you as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Monita. So everybody, please like, subscribe, share, and I will catch you again soon. Thank you so much, Monita. And bye for now.